Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Sinner Sacrifice for Redemption video walkthrough series. This is going to be a preamble for the videos that are to follow, because there are only, I think, 8 fights in this game, and the fights are going to be pretty quick. It's not going to give me too much of an opportunity to talk about the game, about the systems, and about the strategies that I'm going to be implementing in the following encounters. So I'm going to use this as an opportunity to get some concepts out there so that you can understand them going in and hopefully have an advantage in this video game. So the first thing is that this is of course very heavily inspired by the Souls formula, and it is also a boss rush game, which means that not only will you see a lot of comparable mechanics to Dark Souls, Demon Souls and the like, but you only fight bosses in this game. There are a few instances during the tutorial at the beginning that I'm going to be passing through very quickly, where you can talk to spirits and fight some standard enemies, and there are a few bosses that utilise additional enemies to make it a little bit more difficult. They are the only times you will fight anything other than the main attraction of this game, which is this sequence of incrementally more different bosses. The main hook of the game is the idea that you have to sacrifice something to continue, so at the very beginning you will be the strongest your character will ever be, and by the end you will be at your weakest, and by doing this it's going to make the game much more challenging. One of the greatest parts of Sinner is that you can choose which weaknesses you take first and which ones you carry forward in which order you choose. You do not have to go the same route to the bosses that I will. You can do it your own way, focusing on the ones that you find most difficult at the beginning and then leaving you the more easy ones at the end. Due to this, I'm going to be taking on an interesting path through the game, because the 2 sacrifices that I personally don't care too much for, one of them is one that lowers your stamina, and stamina is really important in this game if you want to kill the bosses quickly, and then the second one is your attack damage. One of them lowers your attack damage, so for me, the final 2 bosses will be lowering of stamina, and then the final boss will be the one that removes your damage. It just so happens that both of those bosses I find to be quite manageable, and hopefully I can show you some strategies for them. And what I will do instead is I will be opting to take on the bosses that I think are the most demanding at the beginning, which is only to say one of them, which is the Envy character. I think Envy is the hardest boss in the game, so that will be the first boss that I do. If you're having problems with it, and you probably will at first, because one thing that you need to be aware of, guys, is that this game is incredibly punishing all the time. It is a very difficult and challenging game, but like all games it can be learned, and once you understand it, it's very rewarding for succeeding. But get used to being killed in 1 to 2 hits regardless of where you are in the game, because there are just certain moves that if they hit you correctly, they hurt a lot. And there isn't any kind of cheesy way to hide in this game, or kind of force your way through progress, outside of getting very lucky and getting good patterns. So it's a game that definitely demands that you pay attention and that you learn to play it, which is very refreshing, but it can also be very frustrating for a player that just wants to autopilot. But once again, my walkthrough is here hopefully to help you through with that. So the order of the bosses that I will be doing is kind of specific to myself. Other than fighting the hardest boss at the beginning, there isn't anything too specific other than keeping stamina and damage loss at the end of the run. The next thing that you need to understand is that the combat selection, you can use a small sword and a shield, which is quick but less damage, or you can use a big sword, which does a lot of damage but is very slow and takes a lot of stamina. I will be using the big sword exclusively for this run, because I just like more damage. It's my playstyle, it's what we're going to be doing moving forward. The next thing to know is, much like in Souls games, you can do a heavy attack, you can do a light attack, you can do a running heavy attack, you can do a running light attack, you can charge a heavy attack if you want to, and you can also block, and if you block the moment something attacks you, you will do a parry. From the parry stance you are able to then attack the boss while they're stunned, and certain bosses will have riposte exclusives to them, so there's some fun that can be had with that. And other than that, that's pretty much most of the ways you will be combating the game from the Souls perspective. Now from Sinner's perspective, you also have the ability to throw pots of fire that put a debuff on the ground, where if the boss stands in it, it will constantly tick damage on them. And certain bosses, when you throw this at them, it can have fortuitous results. Another move you have is the ability to throw javelins. You can throw spears at the boss, This is your range attack that does decent damage and in certain patterns can give you some kind of bonus effect depending on how you experiment with it. And then lastly there is a buff that sets you on fire that does, I'm assuming, more damage for you and then eats away at your HP, but in all honesty guys, you will not see me using it because I don't like taking damage when I play video games. One of the things I aspire to do is to try and get hit as little as possible, so if there is a move that actively hurts my HP, I'm probably going to avoid it unless I can accept it and use it for a benefit. And when I use that buff, I really didn't see the benefit. It must be very exclusive and specific to certain moves or certain counters, because the damage didn't seem worth the price in my opinion. So that's pretty much Sinner in a nutshell as far as the moves that you'll be utilising. The only thing left to really discuss now, guys, is the way that we'll be combating on an offensive and defensive perspective. For offense, you want to favour using running heavy attacks if you can only land one move, because it seems to be the most damaging move you can do. Charging attacks aren't as damaging as you would think, so I don't really recommend them. If you only get one opportunity to hit, I recommend doing an R2, because it's slow but it does a lot of damage, and I recommend doing a running R2 if you can. If you can land a full combo, it seems like landing 3 R1s is probably the best bet, because then you'll have enough stamina to get away if you have to roll at the last possible moment, and it's the quickest for the damage that it deals out. On top of that, defensively, the roll and the backstep, both of them have very generous iframes and can be triggered the moment something hits you, and as long as you don't roll into an active hurt box, you will be fine. And even the backstep, which if you've come from Souls, the roll had full iframes, not all of it, of course, you know what I mean though. The backstep did not have the same amount. In fact, I think the backstep might not even have iframes, but it gives you armor. It's been a long time since I've tested it, but dodging things with backstep in Dark Souls is exceptionally difficult unless it does not physically touch you. Whereas in this game, when you backstep, you get a whole blossom full of wonderful iframes, so don't worry too much about that and use it to your advantage if you can. And then lastly, running is incredibly important in this game. If you lock onto a boss, sprinting can be the best way to keep a good amount of separation between you and your opponent, and it can also set up certain scenarios where you can do the most damage. Running around an attack rather than rolling will give you extra time to plan your punish and to land it, and it can open up all new opportunities for great pieces of damage. And then on top of that, it enables you to punish with running attacks, and the running attack takes off a really, really nice chunk. So definitely look forward to seeing lots of that. Lastly, on top of everything I've just mentioned, I will be playing this on the Xbox One, and unfortunately the base Xbox One suffers from occasional stuttering. So there are moments where the game is just a little bit too intensive for the hardware, or its optimization has not been as smoothed out as it would have been nice to have been, and it will just freeze the game for a second. In that moment, it will eat dodges, it will eat inputs, it will eat attacks, it will eat parries, it will do a whole host of very strange things. I've had a boss attack me, and his attack went through my body and did no damage because of the chog in the machinery. So I definitely recommend, if you're going to play on Xbox, do so on an S or on an Xbox One X, or whatever it's called, the big one. If you're on PC, none of this will be a problem, because hopefully it's optimized and it runs very well. But that's something, firstly, to make note of. And then secondly, if you are looking for the most clean fights for a lot of these battles, it's going to be a little bit frustrating, because the one thing I noticed about this game, as fair and as fun as it is, it has a bunch of frustrating factors to each of the encounters that make it a little bit trickier to not take damage than you would probably like. And it stems from things like passive damage, lazy AoEs that are really big and shouldn't exist, adding mobs to battles where they didn't need to be, a whole host of different things that I could truly analyse for hours, but I simply don't have the time. So that's going to be pretty much it from me, guys. That's my preamble for Sinner, Sacrifice for Redemption. This is also going to be a Banishment run, which I should have talked about, but I completely forgot to, so I'll quickly wrap it up here. At the end of a boss fight, you have the option of redeeming the boss. If you redeem it, you will get a health boost, and you will take its soul or something along those lines. It's kind of the path that the game feeds you down, but there's also a system that is not really well explained, but you can discover, as I did myself, where if you refuse to redeem the boss, you will instead banish it, and the fight will end, but you will not receive any of the bonuses from the encounter. And this is essentially a challenge run that you can do for fun, to make you slightly weaker than you would normally be, and I'm going to do it just because It's fun for me. It's a bit more fun when there's more stakes on the line. You don't have to do it. There's no benefit for doing it. I don't think you unlock anything. There's no achievement or trophy for it. It's just something for people who want to take that extra step. And because I make a walkthrough, I want it to be as good, and I want the strategist to be as solid as possible. So if I have less HP than you do, hopefully it will give you a bigger advantage of landing the strategies that I'm going to be passing over to you. But that's it, guys. Enough of the rambling, let's move on to the bosses. Thank you so much for watching, enjoy the rest of this series, I hope it helps, and you take care now.